Mom's voice echoed in my head, "You can sleep on the pull-out couch in our room." That was the moment I knew my carefully laid plans were crumbling. Impulsively, I declared a new plan and cancelled their separate reservations. The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications, 27 messages, a symphony of disapproval. Standing in the hotel lobby, I watched Mom fuss over Ethan's luggage. Each designer bag received her undivided attention, a meticulous inspection to ensure no harm befell its precious cargo. My own suitcase, abandoned where the taxi driver left it, seemed to fade into the background. Some patterns are just too deeply ingrained, I guess. This trip, it had been my project. 3 months of juggling overtime shifts and freelance work, all to fund this all-expenses-paid family vacation. I'd foolishly hoped it would act as a bridge, mend the widening gap between us. A reset button, a clean slate. Now, it felt like a cruel joke I was playing on myself. "Alex, be a dear and check us in while I help your brother with his things," Mom instructed, her eyes never leaving Ethan's starched collar as she straightened it. 32 years old, and he was still being treated like a child. I swallowed the sarcastic retort that threatened to bubble to the surface and approached the reception desk. The hotel was everything I had envisioned: 5 stars, ocean view, impeccable service. I wanted the best, or rather, I thought the best might somehow grease the wheels of this reconciliation attempt. "Reservation for Alexander," I said to the receptionist. She tapped away at the keyboard, a professional smile plastered on her face. "Yes, I have your booking right here. 2 rooms, 5 nights." She slid 2 key cards across the polished marble, the ocean suite and a garden view room. I mumbled a thank you and rejoined my family huddle. Dad had finally deigned to join us, though his attention was glued to his phone screen, undoubtedly drowning in work emails. Too busy for actual conversation, at least with me. "Got the keys," I announced, handing them over. Mom's face brightened momentarily. "Wonderful. Now Ethan, you'll take the suite, of course. You need the extra space for your equipment." Ethan's equipment consisted of his laptop and gaming console, items he wouldn't leave home without. For 3 years, he'd been unemployed, clinging to the title of content creator, despite creating nothing that earned a single penny. I cleared my throat, trying to keep my voice even. "Actually, I thought Dad and Mom would take the suite. Ethan and I can take the second room," I suggested. My mother's reaction was immediate, as if I'd suggested a family campout on the highway median. "Don't be absurd, Alex. Ethan needs his own space. You know how he is when he feels confined." Oh, how could I forget the hallowed ground that was my brother's personal bubble? For 15 years, I shared my room with him. He commandeered 3/4 of it, including the sole desk. I was relegated to the floor to do my homework. Then my father finally looked up from his phone, adding, "The second room only has 1 bed." I frowned, confused. I made absolutely sure I booked a room with 2 queen beds. My mother waved her hand dismissively. "Well, there must have been a mistake. It's not a problem, you can sleep on the pullout in our room." I knew the suite had a pull-out couch. I had researched every detail of this trip. So, the plan was for Ethan to get the master suite while I crashed on a lumpy pull-out in their room? Something inside me shifted, like a fault line that had been under pressure for 24 years, finally giving way. "No," I said. The word hung in the air between us, small but loaded. My mother blinked, processing. "Excuse me?" I said no. I am not sleeping on a pull-out couch. I booked these rooms, I paid for them. My father sighed, that familiar, long-suffering sigh that always seemed to imply I was being deliberately difficult. "Alex, please don't start. We are all tired from traveling." "I'm not starting anything. I'm putting an end to something." My heart hammered against my ribs. This whole vacation was my idea, my treat. I planned every single detail and paid for absolutely everything. Flights, the hotel, all the activities. Yet, I'm still being treated like I'm an inconvenience. Ethan finally glanced up from his phone, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Hey, chill out. It's just sleeping arrangements. It's never just sleeping arrangements, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. It's every birthday where my gifts felt like an afterthought. It's every school play you all missed because Ethan had a sniffle. Every single one of my accomplishments received a polite acknowledgement, while his C- grades were celebrated with a fancy dinner out. The words hung in the air, and I watched a flush creep up my mother's neck. That's not true. We've always been fair to both of you. The sound that escaped me could barely be called a laugh, a short, brittle sound that even surprised me. Right. That's why I worked my way through college, while you happily footed the bill for Ethan's tuition as he bounced between 3 different majors before ultimately dropping out. That's why I wasn't allowed to even hum a tune in my room because it might disturb his concentration, yet he could blast his video games all night long during my final exams. My father took a step closer, his face hardening with disapproval. You've always been jealous of your brother. We thought you'd grown out of it by now. Jealous. The word left a bitter taste on my tongue. It wasn't about envy. It was about being seen, about feeling like I mattered just as much. My mother's eyes began to glisten. Right on cue, the tears that had manipulated me since childhood were threatening. But not this time. You know what? I've changed my mind. I turned and walked back toward the reception desk, my family's stunned silence practically scorching my back. I distinctly heard my father mutter something behind me about, ungrateful child, and, all we've done for her. The same receptionist looked up, her practiced smile faltering slightly at something she must have seen in my expression. I'd like to make a change to my reservation, I said, my voice remarkably calm. 10 minutes later, I returned to my family, a single key card glinting in my hand. There's been a slight change of plans, I announced, holding up the card. I've upgraded myself to the presidential suite. And I've cancelled your rooms. The sheer shock plastered across their faces almost, made 24 years of playing second fiddle worthwhile. Almost. You did what? My father's voice rose in pitch, drawing surprised glances from other guests milling about the lobby. You can't do that, my mother sputtered, her voice a mix of disbelief and outrage. Where are we supposed to stay? I merely shrugged. I believe there's a budget hotel a couple of miles down the road. I heard they offer rooms with charming pull-out couches. My father's face deepened to an alarming shade of crimson. This is completely unacceptable. I demand to speak to the manager immediately. He stormed off towards the reception desk, his righteous indignation fueling his stride. I'm sorry, sir, but the reservation is under your son's name. He's fully authorized to make changes, the receptionist said, offering a practiced smile. I recognized her, she'd helped me only moments before. This is absurd. He can't just leave us like this. My father's anger flared, directed at me. Alex, fix this immediately. You're ruining everything. My mother's grip tightened on my arm, her nails digging in. How could you do this to us, after all our sacrifices? Ethan's face was contorted with anger, his usual smirk gone. You were always the backup plan, you know that, right? Mom and Dad only had you in case I ever needed something. You were supposed to take care of us, not sabotage us. The cold truth hung heavy in the air, a stark realization. It wasn't a joke, it was how they truly saw me. I pulled my arm free and grabbed my suitcase. For once, I'm putting my own needs first, the way you've always prioritized Ethan. My father stepped closer, his voice a low, threatening whisper. I'll take legal action, if necessary. You can't do this to us. That's exactly the point, Mom. What exactly have you done for me that even compares to what you've done for him? Can you name one thing? The silence that followed was deafening and spoke volumes. My father then tried a different tactic. Alex, I know we haven't always been perfect, but this is an overreaction. We came here to spend time together as a family. No, Dad. I came here hoping to finally be treated as an equal. But it took less than 10 minutes in the lobby to prove that it will never happen. I turned towards the elevators, then paused. The vacation activities are still booked. You're welcome to join me for the sunset cruise tomorrow, if you can find lodging nearby. The elevator doors slid shut, leaving them speechless. My hands were shaking as I pressed the button for the top floor. Years of suppressed feelings threatened to surface, but I fought them back. The presidential suite was beyond extravagant, larger than my entire apartment back home. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the ocean, the waves crashing against the pristine white sand. A bottle of champagne was chilling beside a fruit basket. I walked over to the window and watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. The colors were beautiful, but inside, a storm was brewing. I was finally free, but utterly and completely alone. My phone buzzed incessantly in my pocket, a constant, nagging reminder I consciously ignored. For perhaps the first time ever, I deliberately put myself first. The relief was palpable, like shedding a heavy cloak. Years of being perpetually second best, of bending and twisting myself into increasingly smaller shapes to accommodate Ethan's ever-inflating ego, had finally come to an end. I uncorked the champagne, the pop echoing in the spacious room, and poured myself a generous glass. I raised it to my reflection in the window. To a future where I wasn't an afterthought. The night unfolded in tranquil peace. I indulged in room service, luxuriated in a bath in a tub that felt more like a personal pool, and drifted off to sleep in a sprawling king-sized bed, blissfully free from Ethan's snoring and the incessant cacophony of video games. Morning arrived with a digital onslaught, 27 text messages and 8 missed calls, primarily from my mother, her tone escalating with each attempt. The final message, time-stamped at 3 a.m., relayed that they'd managed to secure rooms at a motel 30 minutes away. The accompanying guilt trip was thick enough to spread on toast. My father's back was acting up from the uncomfortable bed, the place was allegedly filthy, and Ethan, predictably, couldn't sleep due to the highway noise. I silenced the phone, resisting the urge to reply. A silver tray arrived, bearing breakfast, eggs Benedict, fresh fruit glistening with dew, and fragrant coffee in a gleaming silver pot. I savored it on the balcony, watching early morning swimmers brave the crashing waves far below. The sunset cruise was scheduled for 5 p.m. I spent the day lounging by the hotel pool, finally losing myself in a novel I'd been meaning to read for months. Uninterrupted solitude, no demands, just the sun's warmth and the quiet turning of pages. I arrived at the marina 15 minutes early. A small part of me, a tiny ember of ingrained habit, wondered if they would actually show up. They did. They looked disheveled and exhausted, huddled together near the ticket booth. My mother's eyes were red and swollen, evidence of tears. My father's mouth was a tight, grim line, etched with disapproval. Ethan looked as though he'd slept fully clothed. I approached them slowly, unsure how I felt. The initial surge of anger had dissipated, replaced by something calmer, more resolute. You came, I stated, the words simple and factual. My father gave a curt nod. We said we would. The cruise itself was stunning. A catamaran, carrying maybe 20 other tourists, sliced smoothly through the water as the sun began its glorious descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. I found myself drawn to the railing, needing to be alone. The rest of my family had gravitated toward the bar, a tight, uncomfortable knot of them. Eventually, Mom navigated her way over to me. I noticed she'd touched up her makeup, but the effort couldn't mask the exhaustion etched on her face. This is childish, even for you, she said, her voice low and strained. Making us stay in that dreadful place. I'm not making anyone do anything, I replied, perhaps a little too sharply. You're all grown-ups. You're perfectly capable of finding your own accommodations. In the middle of peak season, everything remotely decent is completely booked. She sniffed, a delicate sound that somehow managed to convey a world of suffering. Your father had to take allergy medication, the mold in that place. Mom, I said, turning to face her squarely, honestly, I don't care. The words felt brutal, even to my own ears, but they were true. Her eyes widened slightly. I've spent my entire life prioritizing everyone else's comfort, often at the expense of my own. I'm just done with that. This vacation was supposed to be a chance for us to connect as adults, as equals. Instead, I continued, my voice hardening slightly, within minutes of arriving, I was automatically relegated to the couch while Ethan, of course, got the master suite. Some patterns are just unbreakable, and I've finally come to terms with that. So, this is punishment, then? She asked, her voice laced with accusation. I shook my head slowly. No. This isn't about punishing anyone. This is about me finally setting some boundaries. This is about me recognizing that I deserve better than what this family consistently offers me, and finally acting on it. She didn't have a ready response to that, and I could see the gears turning in her mind. After a long, silent moment, she simply turned and walked away, rejoining Dad and Ethan. I watched the three of them huddle together, their heads bent in conspiratorial conversation, their eyes occasionally flicking in my direction. Always a unit. And me, always the outsider looking in. The sun began its slow descent, dipping below the horizon and setting the sky ablaze with vibrant colors. Other tourists were busy capturing the moment, couples embracing, families laughing and posing for photos. I became aware of a presence beside me and turned to see Ethan. He leaned against the railing, looking uncharacteristically pensive. Pretty sunset, he mumbled awkwardly. I simply nodded, unable to muster any enthusiasm. Look, this whole thing is stupid, okay? He ran a hand through his hair, ruffling it slightly. Just give Mom and Dad their room back, and let's just move on. They're too old for that motel crap, he'd said. Of course, an apology wasn't on his agenda. He was here to smooth things over, for him. If you're so worried about them, why don't you offer them your room? Since it's apparently stupid. He actually scoffed. Are you serious? And where am I supposed to sleep? In that bug-ridden dive? The water's not even hot. He invaded my personal space, lowering his voice like he was sharing some profound secret. You know your role in this family. You're the one who cleans up messes, the provider. It's all you're good for. I'm the one they truly wanted around. Isn't that just hilarious? I sighed, the air catching in my throat. So, everyone else's comfort takes precedence, except mine. His face clouded over. You've always carried this victim complex. Poor Alex, so neglected. Meanwhile, you're the one with the steady career and the decent apartment. You're the rock everyone leans on. You're only proving my point, I said, keeping my voice steady. I am the responsible one. I am the one everyone relies on. And what do I get in return? The expectation that I'll happily sleep on a lumpy couch so you can luxuriate in a suite. It's just a room, Alex. No, Ethan, it's not just a room. It's a perfect summary of our relationship. You take, I give. You demand, I comply. You need, I supply. I'm officially done with that narrative. I'm writing a new story now. The catamaran started its turn back towards the dock. He retreated back to our parents without another word, as if I were contagious. The next few days unfolded much the same way. I deliberately indulged in the resort's luxuries while my family members simmered in their less-than-ideal accommodations. They begrudgingly joined me for the prearranged activities, the nature hike, the cooking demonstration, the historical tour. Each interaction was stiff, weighed down by all the things left unsaid and the resentment that crackled beneath the surface. It was almost satisfying. Almost. The final night ended with a knock on my suite door. It was my father, standing alone in the hallway. "May I come in?" he asked, his tone stiff, formal. I stepped back, letting him pass. My eyes scanned his face for any sign of Mom, but he was alone. His gaze swept the room, lingering on the half-eaten room service on the table, the breathtaking city view spread out beyond the glass. A barely perceptible widening of his eyes betrayed a surprise at the extravagance. Your mother wanted to come, but I thought it best if we spoke." I waited, the silence stretching between us. He cleared his throat, the sound amplified in the opulent space. "What you did was petty and uncalled for." Of course, that was how he'd start. No sentimentality, no gentle approach. Just straight to the point. "Is that all you came to say?" I asked, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "No." He began to pace, a habit he had when uncomfortable, from the window and back again. "I came to say that, while your methods were extreme, perhaps there was some justification for your feelings." That was as close to an apology as I was ever likely to get from him. "We may have favored Ethan in certain ways," he continued, his gaze fixed on some distant point beyond me. "He needed more attention. He struggled in areas where you excelled. So I was penalized for being independent." The words hung in the air, heavier than I intended. He frowned, a line etching itself between his brows. "Not penalized. We just didn't worry about you as much. That's the entire problem, Dad. You should have worried. You should have been as excited about my achievements as you were trying to fix his mistakes. You should have seen me, really seen me." I hated the tremor in my voice, the vulnerability it revealed. He looked away, his discomfort palpable. "Your mother was crying last night," he said, changing the subject abruptly. "Is that what you wanted?" I sighed, letting the air escape slowly. What I wanted was to be treated like I mattered just as much as Ethan. What I wanted was for someone, anyone, to have said, "No, Alex shouldn't have to sleep on the couch in the room she paid for while Ethan gets a suite all to himself." But no one did. So, here we are. He was silent for a long moment, seemingly lost in thought. "We're flying home tomorrow. Will you at least drive with us to the airport?" "I've already made my own arrangements." He nodded stiffly. "I see." He walked to the door, his hand resting on the knob. He paused, without turning around. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of what you've accomplished, Alex. You've always been the strong one." The door clicked shut behind him, leaving me alone with the weight of his words, unsure of whether they were a compliment or just another way of minimizing my feelings. His words should have resonated, carried some weight. Perhaps, once upon a time, they would have. But the revelation arrived too late, offered only when I'd finally cornered him. The flight home was unnervingly quiet. We'd ended up on the same plane, despite my insisting on separate transportation to the airport. Ironically, I'd been upgraded to first class, another pointless perk from that awful presidential suite debacle. I caught a glimpse of them boarding after me, filing into economy class without so much as a glance in my direction. Back in my apartment, I instinctively gravitated to the window, watching the city lights begin to twinkle as dusk deepened. My phone had remained stubbornly silent since we'd landed. No calls, no texts, no manipulative guilt trips. The quiet felt fundamentally different this time. Not the heavy, suffocating silence of disappointment and unspoken expectations, but the liberating absence of obligation. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't mentally calculating how to shrink myself, how to twist and contort my own desires to accommodate Ethan's perpetually shifting needs. On a whim, I opened a bottle of wine I'd been carefully saving for a truly special occasion. This, I decided, absolutely qualified. I raised my glass to my reflection in the window, but this time the gesture wasn't tinged with bitterness. It was a salute to the woman I was becoming. Someone who finally valued herself enough to expect, and demand, fair treatment. In the days that followed, I began to rearrange my apartment, transforming the spare room into a proper home office instead of the perpetual, sterile guest room it had always been, always perfectly poised and ready for Ethan's impromptu stays whenever he was conveniently between places. I even booked a solo trip to Portugal, something I'd dreamt of doing for years but had continually put off because my precious vacation days were typically spent helping my family with their never-ending string of emergencies. My shoulders physically felt lighter, my mind clearer and more focused. I found myself smiling more freely at work, engaging more authentically with my friends. People noticed the shift in my demeanor. A week passed, then another. The silence stretched, becoming its own powerful, unspoken statement. I threw myself into my work with renewed energy, even accepted a promotion I'd been hesitant about before because it would inevitably mean less free time available when my family invariably needed something. Now, with those self-imposed ties finally severed, I wholeheartedly embraced the opportunity. About a month after our return, a letter arrived in my mailbox. There was no return address, but I instantly recognized my mother's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a check for the full amount I'd spent on the disastrous vacation, and a brief, detached note, reimbursement for our portion. Thank you for the opportunity to see ourselves through your eyes. I sat there for a long time, just holding the check, turning it over and over in my hands. It wasn't an apology, not by any stretch of the imagination. But it was, perhaps, finally, an acknowledgement. It finally registered with them, the truth I'd been trying to illuminate for so long. Maybe it was too late for it to truly matter, or maybe it was the dawn of something new, a turning point. I reached for my phone, a little tremor in my hand, and texted my mother, check arrived. Coffee next weekend? Those little bubbles appeared, danced their hesitant dance, then vanished, only to reappear. Then, finally, her reply, yes. Your father and I would both like that very much. No mention of Ethan. That struck me as curious, a subtle shift. I placed the phone on the table and gazed out the window, watching the city unfurl beneath me. Millions of tiny lights, each representing a life, a story, a family, a tapestry of relationships, and I wondered about all the hidden hopes and disappointments, the constant striving to be seen, to be valued. For the first time, a profound sense of freedom settled over me. Not freedom from my family, I wasn't so foolish as to believe one event could erase years of ingrained behaviors, but freedom from the desperate need for their approval. I had finally granted myself permission to exist fully, to claim my own worth. I had prioritized my own well-being, my own voice. And somehow, in doing so, I had managed to break through, to finally make them truly see me. Not as the ever-agreeable daughter who always yielded, not as a mere shadow cast by Ethan, but as Alex, a complex individual with boundaries, with desires, with intrinsic value. The coffee meeting promised to be uncomfortable, I knew. There would be the familiar pull to slip back into old roles. But something essential had changed within me. I had changed. I would never again accept being second best, a supporting character in their story. Not to them, not to anyone. Least of all, to myself.